Good afternoon, Mr. Campbell. Let me just briefly introduce you to our audience so they get an idea of you and your previous work and accomplishments. You're the author of the trilogy My Big TOE, which stands for Theory of Everything, and I quote, it seeks to unify, now to quote, science and philosophy, physics and metaphysics, mind and matter, purpose and meaning, the normal and the paranormal, as well as shines a light on the common spiritual basis of the world's major religions, while placing beliefs, dogma, and creed into a bigger picture. Preceding your authorship of these books, you had a professional career as a large systems analyst and physicist with NASA for more than 30 years. Sometime into your career, you joined Mr. Bob Monroe's team of volunteering participants and research team members. The experiments include practices including volitional out-of-body experiences, remote viewing scenarios, telepathy, and other paranormal phenomena at the time. In the proverbial nutshell, if you had to put your big theory into it, what does it say?
Well, it's hard to put a theory of absolutely everything in a nutshell. It doesn't fit in nutshells very easily. Even the largest of nutshells, even a coconut shell would be very difficult. But if I just had to say just a few words to summarize it, let's put it in maybe 25 words or less, something like that. I would first say that it is science and it is logical. Mm-hmm. It has no strange assumptions. It has only two assumptions, and one is that consciousness exists, and another is that evolution exists. And from that point on, it's just logical. So, where does this logically lead? And how does consciousness evolve? And where does it go? Starting with the most, simple piece of consciousness you can start with, and then we let it evolve. So it starts that way. And eventually, we see that consciousness is an information system. Consciousness is about information. Perception is gathering information. Awareness is aware of what? Well, you describe that what with information. So consciousness is information, and I posit the consciousness as just an entire system, okay, as what I call the larger consciousness system. And I show in my model, I go through a couple of logical steps, which eventually comes to the conclusion that consciousness is fundamental, more fundamental than the physical reality. That is logically derived from the fact that in my experiments within the non-physical, I found that I can make changes in I can do things in the non-physical that make changes in the physical. But I can't do the reverse. I can't make changes in the physical that make some kind of substantive change in consciousness. So from the larger consciousness system, you can modify physical things, but it doesn't go the other way. So logic tells you that the consciousness is the superset. The causal logic flows from consciousness to the physical reality. So consciousness is a superset, and this physical reality is a subset of that larger consciousness system. Actually, it's a simulation created by that larger consciousness system. The readers may not understand this, but it's a simulation that's basically an entropy reduction trainer. It's a virtual reality, just like we have flight trainers for pilots. This is an entropy reduction trainer for individuated units of consciousness.
Maybe I can help out here. Entropy is like devolving from order to disorder. Can we put it like that, maybe?
Yes, entropy is a measure of disorder. So high entropy is high disorder.
Yes.
So you have an information system that's nothing but random bits, then that system is at its maximum entropy. And as you get some of those bits and order them, that creates information. That ordered bit could be a letter of the alphabet or a number or something that has intrinsic meaning and significance, which then creates information. So in any case, more logic derives the fact that consciousness, individuated units of consciousness like us, that's what we are, that our purpose here, now I've skipped about 4 or 5 steps in this because I'm trying to squeeze it all into this proverbial nutshell. So I've skipped a lot of logical steps here, but it turns out that consciousness is evolving. Okay, the consciousness system is evolving. It's a real system. It's not infinite. It's not perfect. It's a real system. It's an ongoing process. And it's not perfect. But in any case, it does serve that same sort of function as the source. So this larger consciousness system is the source. And the way consciousness evolves is to lower its entropy, create information, because it's an information system. And individuated units of consciousness like us, we form a social system. And the way a social system optimizes itself, of course, is by lowering its entropy. But it does that by cooperating, by caring, by giving. You know, it's a, and I just sum all that: cooperation, caring, giving, you know, empathy. There's a whole lot of those kinds of, you know, huggy-feely words that go up there, but I call them all just love.
Cool.
So it turns out that we, as individuated units of consciousness, are here in this virtual reality that consciousness has also evolved, didn't program, but evolved it. You know, set initial conditions with a rule set. You punch the run button and let the initial conditions change according to the rule set, and that's a simulation. And it evolves, and it evolves into our physical reality, our physical universe. And that is there to give us individual units of consciousness choices that have important, you know, moral overtones, choices that have consequences, choices that really matter, as opposed to consciousness just being in a big chat room where they're all chatting with each other, but there's very few consequences that have, you know, any significance. The consequences are all very minor. Therefore, the evolution is very minor. So the system needed to make this virtual reality to give consciousness an environment in which they were more severely challenged, more severely tested, and by the choices that consciousness makes, that's how it evolves. If those choices are choices in the service of love, or cooperative choices, caring choices, choices about other, then that is lowering its entropy, which is positive evolution. If the choices are self-serving and, you know, egotistical and belief-based, then that puts them on the opposite side of love, which is fear, and that's de-evolution. So consciousness makes choices. This virtual reality gives us a wonderful set of choices in this multiplayer game we called physical reality. So now that kind of gives you a very, in a nutshell, sketch of the model. So it's about virtual reality, but virtual reality where consciousness is the computer. There's lots of different virtual reality concepts out there, but this one is unique in that consciousness is the computer.
I understand. I was going to say that ideas and theories of this reality being a simulation actually has gained some traction over the last decades. You say that your theory is insofar different as it posits consciousness first and fundamental as the system and its cause at the same time, if I understood you correctly. Like it's the cause and effect at the same time in the beginning, and once it starts, once someone presses the enter button or the run button, evolution takes place and consciousness evolves, and becomes more sophisticated and more aware probably of itself and all these things that we attribute to evolution, at least where it pertains to human beings. Are you okay with that summarization?
Yeah, pretty well, except I wouldn't say that when the run button is hit, that's not necessarily when consciousness begins to evolve. Consciousness is an assumption going in that consciousness exists. But I start with it in its primordial or its most basic form. Consciousness I define as awareness with a choice. It's awareness that makes choices. It's just that simple. Mm-hmm. So it's aware. That means it has perception. It's aware of things. And it's aware of itself. I guess it's the first thing that you're aware of is the Descartes moment. I think, therefore I am. So you're aware of yourself, and then it can make choices. And choices require time. Before choice, after choice. So if you have determinism, you have no time and no choices. Everything is just predetermined. If you have consciousness, then you have choices, and you have time, and you have one other thing, and that's free will, because without free will, there also are no choices.
Okay.
The word choice doesn't define anything if you have a deterministic reality, because there are no choices. Everything is already determined. So to have an awareness with choice requires free will and time and consciousness. Those three go together. Now, on the opposite end of that, that's directly and logically opposed, the opposite of that, you might say, is materialism. And if you are a materialist, then you must also be a determinist. Materialism and determinism have to go together, just like the time and the consciousness and free will have to go together. They have to go together in a sense that you couldn't have any of them if you didn't have the others. It takes all three of those together to make a real thing. And with the materialism, it's the same way. It's impossible to be a materialist and not be a determinist and still be logical. Because materialism is actually Newton's viewpoint of the clockwork universe. The universe is just a big machine. And when you have a big machine, then everything works according to the rules, period. There is no choice. The machine can't say, well, I'll turn over this crank and I'll move this gear. Cranks turn and gears move and things happen as they have to happen in a machine. So that's why determinism has to follow materialism.
But it's interesting, the results from quantum physics experiments were so shocking and were so radically different from everything we had known until then that it forced physics at large to adopt a new perspective. However, some scientists still refuse or reject that and say it's still all deterministic. And you seem to say that this view is entirely wrong, or at least incomplete. What do you say to them?
I'd say it's wrong. What quantum mechanics did initially, I think the double slit experiment was actually the beginning of quantum mechanics. The double slit experiment shows that reality is not materialistic. Information is a very important part about the outcome of that experiment. If you don't know what slit the particle goes through, then you get an interference pattern. If you do know what slit it goes through, then you get a particle pattern, just two lumps behind each slit. So knowing information, that's information. What is known about it is important. It changes the outcome of the experiment. And the only way to mathematically model quantum physics is probabilistically. You have to say particles don't exist. Mass doesn't really exist. It's all just probability. And in the vernacular of quantum physics, when you make the measurement, that is, when you collect the information, then the wave form collapses to a particle. Then you get a little chunk of mass. But the particle fundamentally is just probability.